Okay, so this recording goes with the Introduction to Univariate Data PowerPoint. And I'm looking at the slide titled Mean versus Median, and the example says the following data shows the number of days in a row absent from work due to sickness. So let's just start by looking at the numbers without doing any calculations. We can see that up to about 10 is a fairly common number, and there are two numbers on the end, 38 and 80, which are really kind of out there. Somebody must have had a serious illness, whereas to have 4 or 5 or 6 days off seems to be sort of pretty typical, or to have less. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the mean and median and see how they look different. And so this is practice for doing it, but also to give us an idea of why mean and median are both used, why we need two different kinds of measures. So to calculate the mean, all we do is we add up all of those numbers and then we divide by how many numbers there are. So I've just done a quick count. There are 21 numbers there. So when I add up numbers, I get 210. Now I've done it twice, so I think that's right. Please check it for me. So we've got 210 is what I get when I add up the numbers. I divide it by 21 because that's how many numbers there are. So whoever wrote this question, which was me, did it deliberately, so we got some nice easy numbers. 210 divided by 21 gives me 10. Okay, if you need to grab a calculator to check that, please do. So that's how I do the mean. What about median? Median is another way of saying the middle number. So I've got 21 numbers. I want to know what is the number in the middle. And now be careful, we don't just divide by 2. All right? The easiest way to think about it is if I just had 21 stones, can I divide them into 2 piles? I can. I'll have 10 in one pile, 10 in the other pile, and then 1 in the middle, which I won't know what to do with. So that 1 in the middle is actually our middle. So we'll have 10 on the left, then we'll have a middle number, and then 10 on the right. So let's count along. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This number 4 is the 10th. That makes 5 my middle number. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 on the right. So my median here is actually 5. All right. I want you to pause for a minute and think about which of these two numbers do you think gives a better representation of a typical number of days to be sick? Okay, you've had a think. I hope that you said it's the median, because clearly when we look at the numbers, there are only 2 10s and they're right on the right-hand side. There are all these numbers that are smaller than 10 that are typical. What happens with our average when we add things up, that 38 and that 80 really skewed our mean to be higher than should be typical. So I'm going to choose in this instance the median as a typical number. This is why we have more than one measure of central tendency, because in some circumstances one is more appropriate and in some circumstances it'll be another. So I'm just going to go back to the slide above, numerical data summaries. I hope you can figure out a way to keep listening to this while looking at the slides. We've got measures of central tendency. This is slide 16 according to what I'm looking at. Measures of central tendency, we've got mean and median and mode. So measures of central tendency will tell us more or less where's the middle, what's a typical data value. Now I'm going to go down through mean versus median down to the measures of spread slide 18. So we have 2 different measures. A measure of central tendency tells us more or less where does the middle tend to be, where's the centre. A measure of spread tells us how far on either side of that middle can we expect our data to go. So there are 2 different measures of spread that we're going to look at. The first one is range. Range is very simple. It's the distance between the lowest and the highest value. So I don't have it written up there on the slides, but looking back down to the example that I've got written in front of me with the sick days, if I can see that my minimum value is 1 and my maximum value is 80. So my range, therefore, is going to be 80 minus 1, 79. So now I can say two things about this data. I can say it's got a median of 5. I'm not going to use the mean because I think it's not appropriate. So it's got a median of 5 and a range of 79. So that tells me if I couldn't see the actual numbers, I can visualize it. 5 is pretty average, but on one side or the other, the numbers get pretty far away from the middle. That's what I know. That's what I now know. Okay, I'm going to the next slide. 5 summary statistics. We are going to do an example of this, but for a moment, let's just look at the 5 summary statistics. I'm just going to, hang on. Just drawn a box here, and what I want you to imagine is this box contains all my numbers in order. They're in order from smallest to largest. Let's imagine they're stones, right? From small, all lined up in a row from smallest stone to biggest stone. So the easiest thing I can do, and we've just learned how to do that, is I can cut them in half. I can say, where's the middle? All right. Now that's not always as straightforward. We'll do a couple more examples in a minute because sometimes you've got an even number of stones and there is no middle, but we'll deal with that in a sec. Basically, that's my median right there. There are 2 other values that we've already just talked about and we've used them to calculate the range. One is called the maximum and the other one is called the minimum. I'm just going to write max and min. I hope you know that I mean the maximum and the minimum. There is one other way we can divide up this data. What I can do is I can take my lower half and I can cut that in half. And I can take my upper half and cut that in half. So what that means is that in each of these boxes I've got a quarter, or 25% of my data. Each box contains a quarter of my data. I'm going to call this Q1, which stands for, Q stands for quartile. I'll just write that, quartile, though this is in the slide. And Q1 is the lowest quartile, the lower quartile. This one I'm actually going to call, not Q2 as you might be guessing, Q3. And the reason it's Q3 is because the median is also known as Q2. So the 3 quartile values, Q1, Q2 and Q3, are the lines that cut my data into quarters. But when I say quarters, I don't mean quarters of value, right? I mean quarters in terms of how many of my data values are there on each side of those lines. So if I look at the example I did earlier with the sick days, remember that I found a median of 5. In no way was that in the middle of between 1 and 80. So we're not dividing our numbers up according to the actual value they have, but half of the numbers were lower than 5 and half of the numbers were greater than 5. So I'm dividing it up in half in terms of how many values am I dealing with. Okay, so Q1 is my lower quartile. What that means is that to the left of Q1, or rather lower than Q1, is a quarter of my data, and higher than Q1 is a quarter of my data. And it also means that this space in between the 2 quartiles contains half of my data. I'm going to write IQR here, and that actually stands for, I'll write it down the bottom, interquartile range. It's fancier sounding than it is. It's another measure of spread. It's another way of measuring range. Remember in the example we just did, we had those funny values, 38 and 80? The interquartile range will give us a better idea of how far typical values will spread. So even though it's not on the slide, I'm going to use that example in a moment, and I'm going to calculate Q1 and Q3. Now the quartiles are calculated in exactly the same way as the median. We choose all of our values and then we just find the middle value. So hold on just a sec. So what I've got here, I've got those numbers again. So if you remember, we have 21 numbers. Here are 10 numbers. Oops. And here are 10 numbers. And then here is the middle number. That is our median, if you recall. Now, to calculate my quartiles, the first thing I have to think about is, did I use the median? Yes, I chose the number 5. That was the median. So I'm just going to sort of cross it off because I've got my median. And now I'm going to use these 10 numbers here to find my lower quartile. I've got 10 numbers, so it's not so easy to find the middle. I'm going to have 5 on either side. And if I draw a line down here, that's actually going to be my Q1. In this case, it's easy because I've got 3 on the left and 3 on the right, so my Q1 is going to be 3. Ooh.
Hi.
Okay, now we're going to do the same thing to find Q3, the upper quartile. We're going to look at these 10 numbers here and we're going to find the middle. So I'm just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to draw a line down there between 7 and 8 because that's the 5th and the 6th. I'm just going to check, yes, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers to the right of that line as well. So in between 7 and 8, Q3 is going to be 7.5 or 7.5. All right, and the way I do that is I literally find the mean. I add them together, 7 and 8, and I divide by 2. So if I add 7 to 8, I get 15. I divide by 2, I get 7.5. Or you can just intuitively look at what's the middle. Okay, so that gives you an idea also of what to do differently when there are even or odd numbers. So there were 21 numbers in total. That's odd number of values. Then we can find the actual middle number as we did for the median. But for the quartiles, we had even number of values. So when we found the middle, we had to look in between the 2 middle numbers to find the average. So Q3 is 7.5. Okay. So I've now found 3 values, Q1, the median, and Q3. If I add 2 more values, the min, which is 1, and the max, which is 80, I now have what's called my 5 summary statistics. So if you go back to the PowerPoint, you can see 5 summary statistics. I'm just reading. A summary of 5 key values can tell us a lot about a set of data. And the 5 values are min, the lowest value in the data set, Q1 of first quartile, or also called lower quartile, and that's the middle of the bottom half of data set, then median, then Q3, then max. All right. So now I'm going to look at the example on the last slide. The last slide shows a set of 20 numbers, which are the number of correct answers that different groups got in a pub quiz. Okay, so there were 20 questions in this pub quiz. So there are no values greater than 20. In fact, no one got 20 right. And of course, there are no values below 0 or even 0. No one got none right. But this is a different kind of data set because there is a minimum and a maximum possible value. So it's going to look different to our sick day data, which could go on and on up to a maximum of 365, I guess, in a year, or That's not 365, however many work days there are in a year. So in this example, what we need to do is calculate the 5 summary statistics, and that's a standard univariate data question. Calculate 5 summary statistics. So in order to do that, first I need to actually put the data in order. Now that's been done for you on this slide, as you can see. But bear in mind when you're doing it that you have to be quite careful about this, because if you make a mistake in this process, your answers are going to be wrong. So we count how many values we have, and in this case I think we have 22. And then you simply start by writing down the numbers, and what I would do is I would cross them off as I use them. So if there are any left not crossed off at the end, you'll be able to see that you've missed some numbers. All right, so first, step 1, rewrite the numbers in order. There it is. Step 2, find the middle. And I've drawn a line down the middle there. Because there are 22 numbers, that's an even number of values, my median will be found in between the 11 and the 12. So in fact, median is going to be 11.5. Okay? Now, because I didn't use an actual number for my median, it's a line in between. I'm not crossing anything off, and I'm using all the numbers to my left and all the numbers to my right. So there are 11 numbers to the left of that line, because that's half of 22. So now I've got an odd number, so I will have an actual middle value. So the middle value of 11, there'll be 5 to the left and 5 to the right and 1 in the middle. So it's the 6th number, and that's the 9, that's circled. Same thing on the right-hand side, the 6th number is 14. So now I've got my 5 summary statistics. My minimum value is 5, Q1 is 9, median is 11.5, Q3 is 14, maximum is 18. And that's the end of the univariate data slides.